So welcome to the Knowledge Granary Conversations. This is really an opportunity where we tap into African experts or people who've worked in the continent in protecting children, and they can guide us into knowing what to respond to. This conversation will be focusing on Sudan and the conflict that has been going on. I tempted to say it's almost looking like forgotten now that there's new things happening in Iran and Ukraine and other places. But we're privileged to have with us someone who's worked both in the military and worked in child protection. And I'm going to invite him to introduce himself and give us perspectives on what's going on in Sudan conflict and what can be done differently. Welcome, Major Retired Patrick Musibi. I want to tell us where you're taking this call from and what do you do?
Thank you very much, Sam. This is a great opportunity to come together and look at this conflict in Sudan. As you have rightfully said, is kind of being overshadowed by the new conflicts that have just erupted. I'm currently seated in Busia County on my farm, where I'm a smallholder farmer. I retired from UNICEF at the beginning of November in 2024. I had worked in Uganda as a child protection specialist, especially focusing on child protection in emergencies. So we're looking at public health, we're looking at natural disasters, we're also looking at conflict, especially on the border between Uganda and the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Before then, I was in Cameroon, where I was working as a child protection in emergency specialist, covering the Anglophone crisis. Now, in the whole of Cameroon, they have 10 regions. 8 are French-speaking, 2 are English-speaking. So sometime around 2016, 2017, there was a kind of a civil war between the English-speaking side pitted against the French-speaking speaking side. So I was invited to join UNICEF, starting off in Yaoundé and then on to a place called Boya. Boya is the capital of Southwest region. The other English-speaking region is Northwest. So the capital of Northwest is Bamenda. So Bamenda is very more known than Boya, but Boya was our main office as we responded to that. Before then, I was also in South Sudan, where I worked specifically on children associated with armed forces and armed groups. So I interacted with the government military and the armed groups to work on releasing children who had been enlisted and then reintegrating them back into their societies. Before then, yeah.
No, and I was going to say you, of course, have served in the military.
Yes. So before joining the UN, I served in the military for 13 years. I was with the Kenya Air Force. Served between 1978 and 1991 when I retired. I went into development for a short while, from 92 until 1996. And then from 96, I went into the humanitarian field, specifically serving with UNICEF Operation Lifeline Sudan. First of all, based in northern Kenya, and then later based right inside the southern Sudan, then where the conflict between the government and the Sudan People's Liberation Army, Sudan People's Liberation Movement were based. So I've seen both sides of the divide. I've been in the military and then went into child protection in the humanitarian field, which I find people find quite an interesting combination, but it has helped me very much, especially in working both with both belligerents. I can work with I can talk to the government side, and I can talk to the armed group sides, and somehow find a common ground where we can be able to protect children. Yeah,
and that's why you are a good guest in our Knowledge Granary series, because then you are able to bring out quite a number of learnings. Now,
yes,
tell us about in your work in Sudan region, and maybe your recent experience and working with the colleagues, just how big is the scale of children affected by conflict in Sudan?
Sudan is a very unique place. Remember, Sudan has had a problem, especially in the western part of the country, in Darfur, from as far back as 2003. And you find that even in the current conflict, you can connect it back to that conflict that started in 2003. Currently, we are looking at but just over 17 million children who are currently in need of various services that they are not getting because of the conflict. And this is a figure that we get from UNICEF's humanitarian action for children, which is something that they produce on a yearly basis, giving us the number of children in need and what kind of needs they need. So right now we are talking about 17.3 million children
that's a
who
whole
are
country
in need. Yes,
that's a country.
Yes.
Wow. And
Yeah.
I mean, I can imagine what kind of a generation that is growing up. What are the likely effects on this? How is conflict going to impact this whole country of 17 million people? I mean, it's equivalent to another country somewhere.
Remember, when conflict starts, the first thing to suffer is education. So schools are closed, and right now, as we are speaking, 10.8 million of those 17.3 million children are not going to school anymore. Okay.
Wow.
Now, we are fearing what we are calling creating a lost generation. A generation that did not get the opportunity to be in school and to develop to their full potential.
Right.
And the crisis is also multifaceted. In fact, it's being called a polycrisis because you have got the conflicts, then you have public health, and you also have droughts, which is causing famine and things like those. So you can imagine how compounding it is, or the compounding effect it's having on children. You can't go to school, you are hungry,
Yes.
you are faced with threats of diseases that could, under normal circumstances, be addressed. But now, because we are very, very busy fighting,
We
we
cannot
don't
be
get
able.
those kind of services. Yes.
And I can imagine the psychological impact when we're talking about a lost generation. From your work, even in other countries, including in the West Africa, what have you observed when these fellows get to be young adults?
I'm telling you, and that's why we always, when we go into to carry out an intervention on behalf of children in a conflict setting, one of the first things that we do is look at the issue of mental health and psychosocial support, because the environment that these children have been existing in has been disrupted. And once you disrupt that, you bring about anxiety, fear, and eventually you find that children start regressing from the developmental trajectory that they had taken, starts coming backwards. And if they continue existing in that environment without any form of support, this is trauma that they will carry into young adulthood. And when we are working with these youths formerly associated with armed forces and armed groups, this comes out very, 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 very clearly. So you have got to continue making sure that you are aware of the kind of traumas that they have gone through, so that even as you are designing the interventions, they have to be trauma informed.
That's
and
right.
we are doing a lot of disservice to our children when we are letting them grow up in these kinds of destabilized environments.
And it looks like the element of child soldiers is not something that we've put to a stop. Is this a problem in Sudan too?
I'm telling you, any place where there's a conflict, is as sure as night follows day, there's going to be an issue of child recruitment and use. When I went to Cameroon for the very, very first time, somebody sent me small clip, and it was of a child holding an AK-47 and saying how he's going to shoot government troops. So I said, even Cameroon, we have this problem, because I had not been informed that there was any problem of child soldiers. So I started following on this, and slowly but surely, not only the element of child soldiering, but we are also having incidents of grave violations against children's rights. When you look at the six grave violations, they were happening, but Cameroon was off the radar. So I collected information, shared with the leadership in Yaoundé, which then took it up with New York, and this culminated in Cameroon becoming a situation of concern, which then required that we have to continue, or we have to start reporting on grave violations on a monthly basis.
Do you mind mentioning what are these 6 grave violations?
The 6 grave violations: 1 is killing and maiming of children.
Mm-hmm.
2, recruitment and use of children in armed conflict. 3, sexual violence against children. 4, abduction of children. 5, 5 is attacks on schools and hospitals, and 6 is denial of humanitarian access. So those are the 6 grave violations. And in any conflict, you will always find that they exist there. And once you start getting those violations, you are required to report on them to the UN Security Council. They have a working group on children
Right.
and armed conflict. Yes.
And
So
and,
this
and
is
in
happening in Sudan also.
and thinking about the parties involved in Sudan,
Yes.
what is the chance that they are doing this? I think we have the Rapid Support Forces, we have Sudanese Armed Forces, and other groups.
Yes. In fact, it is said the rapid
Support Forces.
support forces have a genesis with we used to call them Janjaweed in the conflict in Darfur. There seems to be a lot of commonalities between what was Janjaweed then and what is the rapid support forces at the moment. And then you have the Sudan Armed Forces, which is the government military. And, since the overthrow of Omar al-Bashir, Sudan has had a military government. So you have two military factions going at each other. At some point in time, the government, the rapid support forces took over Khartoum, and the government, the Sudan Armed Forces moved their capital to Port Sudan. But I think at the moment, I've been in contact with some colleagues who are working with the government, and they say they're in Khartoum now. So I don't know how the situation is unfolding at the moment. But as we always say, when two elephants fight, it's the grass that suffers. And in this situation, the grass is our children. So it's a very, very serious situation in
and
Sudan.
You mentioned the need to report the UN security within the African mechanisms, including those in charge of children.
Yes.
Are there systems in which we can put pressure on this, and why is it not working?
So you find that from an African perspective, of course, we have the African Union, and within there, the African Union has the African Charter for the Rights and Welfare of Children. And within there, we have a reporting mechanism on the situation of children in the individual African countries. So the government is supposed to produce a report every so often on the implementation of the charter and the kind of challenges that they are facing, but also what we call civil society can also write a report, an alternative report, which can also be sent to the committee of experts who monitor the implementation of the African Charter. Unfortunately, we don't have an enforcement mechanism, so we can only report. But the more robust response is through the UN Security Council and the Office of the Special Representative of the Secretary General on Children and Armed Conflicts.
Right.
Because through that mechanism, we report these grave violations. They're discussed at the Security Council level, and sanctions come into place to address the individuals who are committing those violations. They have to sign an action plan that says, one, we are going to stop these violations, and we are going to take these steps to ensure that that happens. And if they continue on that trajectory and actually stop those violations, they'll stop. They'll be removed from the list of parties that are committing grave violations against children.
Which is then a good point to really ask the question. So why is this continuing? I mean, especially the involvement of children, the abuse. Is it these sanctions are not working, or what's it?
Yeah, this is the problem. Like within Sudan itself, in this conflict, it's not just these two belligerents, the Sudan armed forces and the rapid support forces. We also have external parties that are kind of the vested interests in the situation in Sudan. So the government itself, the rapid response forces, also have militias that are allied to them. And then you have external countries, Turkey, you have UAE, you have Saudi Arabia, you have Israel, everybody out there with something to say or something of interest within Sudan. And once you have a multiplicity of vested interests, it becomes very, very difficult to negotiate a resolution to the conflict. So that multiplicity of vested interests are what is causing the conflict to continue, and in the process, the suffering of children continue.
So Major, why do you think as a continent we failed to build a mechanism that we can do our own way of enforcement?
At the moment, we have tried, especially in West Africa, Southern Africa, and also in Eastern Africa. We have this the African Standby Force, which the aim was for it to intervene in any African country where there is a conflict, to go in and protect civilians and especially children. So in East Africa, we have gone quite some distance with the Eastern Africa standby force. Like it is
what is the ones that were intervening in Somalia too, and
in Somalia, okay, right. Then also in DR Congo. Then SADC have a standby force which was also intervening in DR Congo. Of course, we have ECOWAS, which has been intervening in several African countries. Right. But this is something that we are kind of wading into uncharted territory. So it's trial and error, and error. And hopefully, as we gain the experience, at the moment, any deployment of military forces in peacekeeping or peace support operations, they get trained on issues of the rights of children and protection of children. Okay, we have child protection focal points within the military forces going into peace support operations. And of course, from the UN side, they have what we call child protection advisors. So that way you have kind of child protection running through, being mainstreamed in the whole aspect of peace support operations.
Which then really, if we were to speak to the African Committee of Experts, I think there's a special rapporteur that have been assigned on some of these things. Given your experience, what would you advise as some critical measures to protect these children from being a lost generation in Sudan conflict?
Yeah. The first thing, and this is something that I've been working on since the year 2000, is approaching both the military and armed groups, okay, to be trained on child rights and child protection, so that at the back of their minds, when they're deploying, they have to be thinking about children. Because these days, we fight in villages, we fight in urban centers. So we are literally brought war to children. So it's important that me, as a soldier, okay, bearing a gun, I'm always conscious of the presence of children in the environment or in the theater of operation. I can not emphasize that. We need to have our militaries, especially our doctrines, infused with child protection, so that as a commander sits to plan an operation, he asks himself, am I going to encounter children in this place I'm going? And if I'm going to do that, what are the measures I can put in place to mitigate the situation, reduce the impact of my operation on children who are going to be in that theater?
And does that always work even for the other militia groups? Is it possible
yes,
to?
actually, it's very interesting. It's very interesting. When I was in South Sudan, I was involved in the release of children from David Yauyau's faction, which was called the Cobra faction. Okay, and I used to interact with the leadership of the David Yauyau faction, and I could talk about children and their protection with them. I could go there to follow up on children who had been released and had then gone back. They had been recruited, and I would go and sit down with the Major General and say, sir, this is the situation. We have this child who we had released, and we are told that he's back in group, and they would actually tell me, okay, where? I said, I was told in such and such a place, and we would go, and actually, you say, okay, can you go away with that child? So one thing we need to understand is that whether in the government forces or in the armed groups, they are fathers, they are parents, okay? And, talking to somebody to protect a child, you will always touch something. in that person.
There's
Whether it's a
there's a
rebel
soft
or
spot
a
for
government,
children.
there's a soft spot for children. Yeah.
That's very
Yes.
optimistic, at least that even in the midst of this, we need to speak to the human conscience and that both sides get done.
Exactly.
I think you've talked about immediate protection and life-saving measures, mental health. Do you want to give a brief summary on what are priority actions on that?
Okay. First of all, just as we were talking about what we should do differently, besides training the military or the armed groups in terms of on issues of child protection, there's also the need to enforce the Safe Schools Declaration, which says, please keep conflict away from schools, because schools are a kind of they are a layer of protection around children. Okay, so even if we are having issues out here, please let us keep them out of schools.
School spaces, they are safe
Yes,
spaces.
yes, so that a school is a safe space for a child. So, looking at what we need to do specifically in the situation of Sudan, we have a lot of suffering in Darfur. We have a lot of suffering in Kordofan. We need humanitarian corridors to be created where humanitarians can access the populations in need, which includes children. That is very, very critical. We cannot say we will wait for the guns to fall silent before we can provide the assistance needed to the populations in need, and especially our children. So those humanitarian corridors become very, very important. As I've mentioned, we need to avoid attacks on schools so that schools become safe spaces where children can find peace even as they continue learning. There is this initiative of no lost generation within the Middle East and Northern Africa region. It was focusing on Syria and Iraq. And I believe right now that the conflict has spilled into the general Gulf area. Then we need to bring the No Lost Generation initiative forcefully into the Sudan crisis, so that whatever initiative that was there for Iraq and Syria is also brought into the face of into the situation in Sudan. Then the other thing is investment in community-based trauma centers that children can access and be provided with psychosocial support within their community environment, because we cannot afford to lose track of the trauma that children are going through, and we need to do our best to ensure that we address this through these community centers.
Right.
Yes.
Thank you. As we come towards a close, I mean, what would be your key highlight in terms of the lessons you've learned in, being involved in some of this child protection within conflict that can apply in Sudan?
The thing is, Literally, uh, child protection in a conflict environment literally is across board. Whether you are talking of the conflict is happening in Sudan, or is happening in Cameroon, or is happening in DRC. The thing is the consciousness that we have to bear all the time is that anything that is happening, children are present in that environment. So we need to always be conscious that whatever actions we are taking are going to have an impact on children, and do our best to ensure that that impact is minimized as much as possible. There are guys who have tried to say, okay, let us position the military in schools to protect. Again, that is not the solution. First of all, a child seeing a soldier in uniform and carrying a gun, that even if it's a government soldier, the child will still respond to that presence just like any other person holding that. So let us keep guns out of school. Don't try to go in schools and outside every classroom door that you have a soldier there saying that you are protecting children. No, that is not protecting children, actually traumatizing those children. So what you need to do is throw a cordon, okay, outside outside of the schools where you are not interacting with the children. Just make sure the children can access the school safely and go back to their homes safely without having to see you anywhere. Okay, so children and those guns, whether they are in government hands or in rebel hands, the effects is the same in children. So we have to minimize that kind of contact. And of course, as we have said, we cannot wait until the guns have fallen silent. We need these humanitarian corridors into the places where children are in need, so that they can get the assistance they need. Also, let us be very serious on the issue of protecting children against the six grave violations. And where they're happening, even if a mechanism is not in place, we have to do our best to make sure that we put in place that mechanism, that these violations are reported. Because the time they are reported and parties are listed, then they are required to take action to reduce those violations or to stop committing those violations.
Wow. Yeah. Thank you very much. I think I'm really encouraged that even when you've worked with non-government kind of military groups, that there's still the possibility of imploring upon them that they are able to protect children, and it can work. I mean, 17 million children is something that will impact the entire region, I would imagine. It's not only a problem for Sudan.
Yes.
Yes.
Exactly.
So, maybe your last parting shot, what would be your key message to the world?
Yes, at the moment is what I can say is that we have to intervene on behalf of children. And the thing is, it's not just a matter of documenting conflicts. The thing is, we are going to be judged by the number of children that we failed to protect.
That's right.
So protecting our children is an imperative. And I urge the parties to the conflict, I urge the vested interests in the conflict, I urge the African Union and the United Nations to really, really, really do all they can to protect the children of Sudan.
Right. And
Thank
protection of schools, a safe zone, and of course, there's the significance of school as a place to bring the routines back, as you know, as trauma management and all that. So, thank you. But and I will imagine from the experience you've had in the other regions that this is possible, right? It is possible.
Yeah, it is very, 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 very possible. Just the last time when I was in Uganda, it was very interesting. There is this refugee settlement in a place called Kiriandongo. It's in central Uganda. It's an old settlement which had been closed. It was not accepting any new refugees. And the conflicts in Sudan, okay, caused that refugee settlement to be reopened. And the refugees arriving from Sudan were taken there. But remember, Uganda does not share a border with Sudan.
Right.
Okay? But somehow refugees, there are those that came through South Sudan. There are those who are flying from Khartoum into Entebbe and into Uganda. Okay, so those, and you know, if you are able to fly, that means that you are actually well off. And now you go and find yourself in a refugee situation. Maybe you had this flat screen TV, you had the life you are leading there, and now what you are leading, the children were finding it difficult to process.
Right. Yes.
Even adults were
Right.
finding it difficult to process that this is now where we have come to, and we have to start rebuilding from here. So the first thing that we did was to set up child-friendly spaces to address the children, and also establish additional capacity, a classroom capacity in schools within the settlement, so that these children could go to school as quickly as possible. But also remember, Sudan is Arabic. Uganda, the education is in English. Okay? So we had to work very, very hard to try and find teachers who were conversant with both languages, English and Arabic, so that the children could continue learning. So you find you have all those kinds of challenges, but somehow you are able to find solutions that goes towards protection of children.
And I think that's really a good point to end, because it also helps us to appreciate that you can't say those are Sudan children. It's not our problem in Kenya or DRC or where. We eventually get affected, and that's why the Ubuntu spirit is very, very important. I am
very, very important. Yes.
Yes. Thank you for sharing your wisdom in the Granary Conversations. We really want to equate this to how we, there's knowledge that can also turn into seeds that we store within our granary, and we can be able to get to do things better. And like you say, this must be intervened now, because it can't wait for tomorrow.
Yes.
Thank you, Major Retired Patrick Musibi, for sharing your knowledge. And as you do your farming, we'll be coming back to you to advise from time to time on what shall we do differently as we share knowledge together.
I'm always ready for that. Thank you. I've just harvested some mushrooms.
We'll need that.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ranger.
Bye-bye.
Have a good day.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
You too.
Bye.